Hi, our presentation today is on the fundamental psychosocial concepts for understanding disability. I'm Tanvi.
I'm Megan.
I'm Iris.
And we'll be presenting for you today. So our presentation is based on chapter 2 of a book regarding the social psychology of disability. And one concept we're going to touch upon is the insider-outsider distinction. So the insider-outsider distinction is an attributional distinction related to the actor-observer bias. So the insiders in this situation would be people with disabilities or people who have received rehab treatment, whereas outsiders are non-disabled observers. So what happens in this situation is that the outsiders basically make assumptions about how insiders go through their lives and just how they interact with them. So one thing that the outsiders are susceptible to is a concept called naive realism, which is when they see their view of reality rather than an imagined personal interpretation. So in this situation, insiders might view their disability as just another characteristic, but whereas outsiders might view it to be much more all-encompassing of their behavior. So to an insider, having a disability might be just another characteristic like their hair color or their height, but outsiders assume that this plays a much bigger role in their everyday life. Outsiders can also place negative social cues on insiders, so that might be when a non-disabled individual basically treats someone with a disability with more care or gives them more importance than another, views them as weaker than other humans, and that's just based entirely on the disability that they view them to have. So it's also important to note that that a person with a certain disability might be an insider to that disability, but they are outsiders to other kinds of disabilities. So at every point of life, every individual is kind of an insider and outsider. So to capitalize on that, a professor named Wright did an experiment called the Mind-Time problem in 1983. And in this, he basically had individuals come in and on a piece of paper write down any disability that they view themselves to have. And then these sheets were randomly assigned with another disability. And when it was given back to the participant, they were asked to pick whether they would want to remain with, whether they would like to retain their own disability or adopt the other disability that their disability was paired with, and overwhelmingly people basically picked to retain their own. But in this situation, again, an individual was made to feel like they were an insider and an outsider. But considering that they all basically picked their own disability, it made it show that their own disability was a kind of comfort and it was kind of a part of their identity that they would like to retain across time. So furthering this research, Wright basically went and did a conceptual replication, which plays along with the replication crisis that's happening in psychology psychology right now. And when he replicated, his results did match his initial research, which basically solidified the validity of his initial claims. And he also did an extension study in which participants were asked to basically rank themselves on the scale of attitudes towards disabled persons right after conducting the experiment, before conducting it, and a short period of time after. And these were all viewed as overwhelmingly positive. So this shows that the Mind-Time effect does sensitize people to insider and outsider perspectives, which leads to more positive attitudes towards disabilities and people with disabilities.
So often when there are differences, there's something different on the body, this strikes the curiosity of others and makes, it grabs people's attention, and this may happen sometimes when people have a disability. And this term of somatopsychology refers to this relation between how physique influences a person's self-image, their choice of activities, and their other behavioral pursuits. And the reason that this relation between physique and behavior arises is because our body is a tool that allows us to accomplish different activities. So it's a relation between how a person views their disability and how they perceive their ability to do different activities. And it relates to the person-environment relation because it's how a person views themselves and their physical abilities and how they're able to navigate their environment. Additionally, this psychosocial adjustment is not dependent on the disability itself, but on individual and perceived environments, and that two people may have the same disability, but how they perceive their ability to do different activities may change. For example, the book talked about how two soldiers may have lost a leg, but one soldier who was an avid runner before has a goal of running again, but the other soldier does not have the same goal and has no goal of running again because he's afraid that the prosthetic has a different physical view and that it will not be the same running again without his leg. Additionally, two more terms that are important to think about when we talk about disabilities are adaptation and adjustment. And these terms sometimes apply that disabilities are always acquired, or that those who have congenital disabilities do not have to adapt and adjust. And while people with congenital disabilities have always been a part of the in-groups of their disability, and they've always known their life having this disability, they do have to adapt in terms of externalities, such as different ways people view them and different environments that may come about. But additionally, those who have acquired disabilities also face challenges in that they have to start a process of psychosocial adaptation. And this term refers to the process of understanding and coming to terms with a disability and how it's incorporated into an individual's sense of self, identity, body image, and daily life. And so these terms may sound alike, but they have differences in that adaptation refers to this ongoing process of this ongoing somatopsychological process that a person with a disability goes through in order to meet this end destination of adjustment. So it's kind of that adaptation is the process and adjustment is the goal. And psychosocial adjustment occurs when the person with the disability is completely satisfied with their person-environment relation, and that any more losses that come about because of their disability are no longer a preoccupation. Rather, they're able to adjust and not think of it as something as part of their disability. And adjustment can be indicated by various behaviors such as independence, active problem solving, ability to navigate their environment, and many other behaviors. And then beyond just adaptation and adjustment, another term to think about is acceptance. And acceptance involves situations when the disability becomes part of someone's self-concept, so it's completely incorporated into someone's life and their sense of self. And additionally, for acceptance, one must view the disability as something that doesn't lessen their potential, their self-worth, or their psychological function. So it's something that where they view their disability, they've come to terms with it, and they don't view it as something that's lessening them. However, that doesn't mean that they're trying to make it seem like they don't have a disability or mimic someone that does not have a disability. It's more just a realistic recognition of things as they are and the desire to improve the improvable. So focusing on knowing that they have the disability, but focusing on what they can improve. And lastly, for acceptance, a person with a disability views a disability as a term that they use in the book as non-devaluing, and it's also a ways to cope with a disability. And many studies have done research on why some people may come to terms and have an acceptance of their disability while others focus on the negative parts. And however, they haven't come to concrete conclusions because mostly they find that it's individual differences that cause these differences in acceptance. And however, one thing that they did find is that self-complexity is very important, and self-complexity kind of refers to realizing that we are multi-dimensional, and so not putting in terms all our eggs in one basket, and knowing that there are many different parts to our life. And this helps because if someone acquires a disability, they realize that they have many other aspects of their life that they can fall back on.
Now let's talk about assets. Assets are the resources that are distinctive in every person, such as self-identity or self-concept, and personal strength or personal quality. They can signal accomplishments that people with a disability have done. And they can also be future opportunities and future possibilities. And they can also motivate people with a disability to be resilient and thrive in their circumstances. And it's important to realize that disability is not an end state. Rather, it's just only a tiny portion of a person's larger life, just simply one frame of reference among multiple possibilities. And assets are a great way to combat de-individuation, which occurs when a person merges with a group or a mob. In other words, it's a consequence of labeling people invariably. And this can lead to violence. And then to fight against individuation, we should always use person-first language, such as using terms like people with a disability rather than disabled people. And we should always focus on the particular individuals instead of clumping them together as a group. As we have discussed earlier, we emphasize on the importance of focusing on personal strength rather than individual deficiencies linked to a disability. As Lewin's person-environment relation theory suggests, it's better for non-disabled people to treat people with disabilities as unique individuals with particular perspectives, stories, and assets. And it's better for people with a disability and everyone else to focus on what they can actively change instead of what they cannot in order to live a happier and more productive life. So be active, always.
And as we said, all these concepts came from Dana Dunn's The Social Psychology of Disability. And thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you.